You'd think the end of the world would sound like something. Explosions, sirens, the sky splitting open. But it didn't. It came with the morning news and a lukewarm mug of coffee. One cream, one sugar, taking a sip while flipping channels. The kids were arguing about waffles again. Grace wanted the crispy one. Aaron had already taken it. Laura sat at the table with her latest how-to book, this one on building rainwater collectors. She barely looked up as they bickered. On the screen, the anchor spoke with a calm indifference only city news could deliver. A small meteorite landed in the Atlantic Ocean earlier this morning, just off the west coast of Africa. Experts say the object was no larger than a microwave and disintegrated almost entirely on impact. No tsunami, no injuries, no cause for concern. More on that later. In other news, click. I changed the channel. More of the same. I didn't give it a second thought. Why would I? Meteors fall all the time, right? This one was barely a blip. No damage, no headlines, no panic. Just another bit of space debris brushing by our planet. The anchor didn't even sound interested. And honestly, I had more pressing things to deal with, like calming 2 sugar-charged 7-year-olds and finding time to patch the crack in the back fence before someone's dog got through again. If you told me then that little rock would be the thing to break the world, I'd have laughed in your face. A few months passed before anything seemed off. It started far away, the kind of thing buried in the corners of news sites. People in West Africa developing sudden severe food allergies. Weird stuff, fruit, rice, even water in some cases. Some doctors said it was fungal contamination. Others said it was panic-induced. A few called it psychosomatic. No one agreed, and most of the world didn't care. Outbreaks in rural areas overseas weren't exactly breaking news in our part of Ontario. But then it spread. One by one, the reports crossed borders. A farmer in Spain couldn't eat his own bread anymore. Children in Thailand died after drinking milk. Supermarkets in Brazil cleared shelves when a sudden wave of intolerances swept through Sao Paulo. Allergists went on TV to speculate. Talk shows brought in nutritionists. Then came the panic diets, anti-inflammatory this, hypoallergenic that. We joked about it. Next thing you know, they'll say breathing air gives you hives, Laura muttered once, rolling her eyes. But the laughter didn't last. By the 3rd year after the meteor, it was happening here. People started collapsing in restaurants. Entire aisles in grocery stores were deemed unsafe. Labels got longer, more desperate. Food companies were sued, then dissolved. Fights broke out in stores over safe products. Hospitals overflowed, and still nobody had answers. I tried to keep things normal for the kids. I started learning more about wild game, fishing, even small-scale gardening, anything that might keep food on our table. Laura took up researching edible plants and berries. We cut out anything that might be a risk, anything unfamiliar. The kids adapted fast, like kids do. But I started to feel the walls closing in. Some days, I'd walk the neighborhood and see houses empty, abandoned, quiet. Others had gone the opposite direction, fortified, windows blacked out, yards fenced with scrap metal. The polite suburban mask had slipped, and beneath it, people were scared, really scared. Then came the deaths, quiet ones at first, neighbors disappearing, people too sick to move, too weak to eat. Some just didn't wake up. Others did things I won't talk about here, not yet. Laura and I made a plan, emergency bags, an escape route. I bought extra ammo, reinforced the doors. We still thought, foolishly, that we could ride it out, that it was temporary. But the news got worse every day. Now it wasn't just allergies, it was anaphylaxis from water, blood in the stool from eating corn, people convulsing over cooked chicken, no rhyme or reason, no cure. And then the government stopped pretending to be in control. Cities declared martial law, food chains collapsed. Even safe food became deadly after a while. The parasite, whatever it was, kept evolving. We didn't know it was a parasite then. We didn't know anything. I remember one night vividly, maybe because it was the last time I felt like we were just a regular family. We were watching old cartoons with the kids. Grace was asleep on Laura's lap. Aaron was curled under a blanket next to me, clutching his toy wolf. We had a fire going. Outside, the streets were dead quiet. I looked around the room and thought, this can't last. The air felt wrong, like something was building, like we were standing still while the world around us cracked apart. The next day, we heard the first sirens, and we saw the first bodies. It didn't all fall apart in a single day. It was a slow unraveling, like watching an old sweater come undone, one thread at a time, and realizing too late that it's wrapped around your throat. In the first year after the meteor, things got strange. In the second, they got hard. By the fourth, they were unbearable. You could mark time by what food vanished from shelves. First, when the obvious allergens, nuts, shellfish, eggs. Then came bread, milk, soy, fruit, rice. Eventually, even bottled water started giving people seizures. It wasn't consistent. What one person could eat might kill another. The rules changed, mutated, like the sickness was playing games with us. And somewhere in that confusion, trust died. Our street, once full of barbecue smoke and neighborly chatter, turned cold. Shutters stayed closed even during the day. Locks at all hours. Someone built a barricade out of overturned dressers and scrap wood across their driveway, like they were waiting for a war. And maybe they were. One night, I walked past the old Peterson house, quiet since Mr. Peterson got sick from canned beans, and saw someone inside burning their furniture for heat. The smoke rolled out of a shattered upstairs window, thick and grey. No lights, no power. Just heat, desperation, and silence. That smoke, it smelled different. Not quite wood, not quite plastic, something sour beneath it. I didn't ask questions. The government kept telling us to remain calm, that they were making progress, that scientists were close to understanding the root cause. But it was all air. Politicians disappeared from public view. Relief trucks stopped coming. Eventually, even the internet turned into a dead, glitching stream of automated updates and unanswered pleas. People stopped talking about cures. The first time someone tried to break into our house, it was 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of glass shattering in the laundry room. My hands moved on instinct. Knife first, then the baseball bat I kept behind the freezer. He wasn't sick, not yet, just hungry, desperate. I told him to leave. He rushed me instead. It was fast, loud, messy. I remember the color of his hoodie, green, torn at the shoulder. I remember my knuckles making contact with his temple. A fraction of a second before my knife sank between his ribs up to the handle. I remember how his eyes bulged as it did. He looked more surprised than afraid, like he hadn't thought it could be real. He was dead before I could process what happened. It was automatic for me, instinctual, and my thoughts hadn't caught up with my actions just yet. The police never came. We never called. I buried the intruder that night beside the garden, the one where Grace used to build little fairy houses out of stones and moss. I didn't know his name. Didn't care. Laura watched from the back door, the porch light barely working, casting me in flickering yellow as I packed the dirt down with a shovel. Inside, the kids huddled in the hallway, trying not to cry loud enough to be heard. They knew something had changed, that something sacred had snapped. After I washed the blood off my hands and bandaged my arm, Laura and I sat in the living room, the power flickering low, the silence between us heavier than any words. The city outside had gone still. No cars, no sirens. Just the low, constant hum of collapse inching closer with every heartbeat. "We can't stay here," Laura whispered finally, voice raw. I nodded, but not because she was right, because I'd already made the call. "We're going north," I said. She looked at me, tired, scared, but trusting. "It's the best shot we've got," I continued, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling. "Out here we're trapped. Too many mouths, too few options. Too many people desperate enough to do what this moron did. Up north, we've got space, isolation. I can hunt and fish, and we won't have to keep one eye open every damn second." Laura didn't argue. She didn't need convincing. She knew I didn't talk unless I was sure. I'd always been a man who made decisions in the silence, and the silence was screaming now. We left just before dawn. The truck hummed as the engine turned over, the weight of the road stretching ahead. The world outside was quieter than usual, almost too quiet. I could hear the wind whispering through the trees, but the usual noise of the city, the sirens, the car engines, the shouting, was gone. In its place, a hollow silence had settled. Laura sat next to me, her hand gripping the seat in a way that made it clear she was still trying to absorb what had happened. We didn't talk much as we drove through the empty streets, past boarded-up windows and the scattered remains of what used to be a thriving neighborhood. It was like we were ghosts in a place where the living had disappeared. The kids were in the back, both of them quiet for once. I didn't blame them. We were all trying to make sense of everything. It had happened so quickly, everything unraveling faster than we could keep up. "Wayne," Laura's voice was soft but steady. "Are you sure about this?" I didn't look at her at first, my eyes locked on the road. "Yeah, we're not safe here." "But no," I cut her off, my voice firm. "We're heading north. The city is turning into a death trap. We should have left weeks ago." Laura didn't argue. She knew it was the only choice. She'd seen the same things I had. People were getting desperate, starving, panicked, and willing to do anything to survive. Cities like ours, with their dense populations, were becoming breeding grounds for chaos. I had no delusions about what we were facing. The world as we knew it was gone. The collapse had started years ago with the first signs of the food allergies spreading. But this was different. Society was already breaking apart, and all we had left was each other. The road stretched on, a thin thread leading us away from the city, but I could feel the weight of what we were leaving behind. The further we drove, the more my mind raced. I knew I had to keep us alive. The thought of what could happen if we didn't make it to safety haunted me. But what choice did we have? The first sign something was wrong came when we passed through a small town on the outskirts. It was an old place, forgotten by time and all but abandoned now. We stopped to gather supplies. It wasn't much, some canned goods, a couple of water bottles, some blankets, anything we could carry without drawing attention. As I loaded the truck, I noticed something strange. There was no sound, no movement. It was like the town had been frozen in time. I pushed the feeling aside, but the unease gnawed at me. Laura stayed in the truck with the kids, as always, while I went inside the old grocery store. The door creaked as I stepped in, the faint smell of rot and decay hitting my nose. The shelves were sparse, and what little remained was half rotten or useless. But I didn't have time to be picky. We needed everything we could carry. As I moved through the aisles, I heard a noise, a soft shuffle. I froze, listening. It was coming from the back. I eased toward the sound without a second thought. The old store had long been abandoned, and I had no idea who or what could be inside. The shuffle grew louder, closer. Then I heard a low groan, a sound that twisted something deep in my gut. I didn't waste time. I darted toward the back of the store, rounding the corner just as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man. His clothes were tattered, his face gaunt and pale. He was stumbling, eyes wild, and there was something in his gaze, hunger, like the man in our laundry room. I didn't hesitate. He charged. Instinct kicked in as I sidestepped, catching his strike by the wrist, my forearm wrapping underneath his. One hard, constricting upward jerk breaking his arm at the elbow joint. He hissed in pain, grasping at a glass bottle on the shelf at his side. He swung it at me wildly. I ducked it to my left, kicking his leg out from under him, my open left hand following his throat to the floor. He went down hard, hitting the floor with a thud. My vision swam for a moment as he scrambled, mouth open, teeth bared as I unsheathed my knife from my belt. His limbs flailed, and I quickly slammed the blade into his ear. He stopped moving, his body going limp. I stood over him, chest heaving, the adrenaline still rushing through my veins. I quickly grabbed a few more supplies before running back outside. Laura was waiting in the truck, her eyes scanning the area nervously. The kids were silent, staring out the window. I didn't tell Laura about the man I just killed. I couldn't. We couldn't afford to let fear control us. Not now. We drove away from the town, my mind running through the scenario over and over. The further we went, the quieter it became. The sense of isolation started to sink in. I had no idea how long we could keep running, but I knew we weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. The road stretched out before us, a dull grey ribbon through the barren landscape. We'd been on the road for hours, the wind whipping around us in gusts, and still, the silence weighed heavy in the truck. The world had become something different, something unrecognizable, and it felt like we were moving through a dream, one that I didn't want to wake up from. Laura sat in the passenger seat, her fingers tapping nervously against the dashboard. Every so often she'd glance over at me, her eyes filled with a quiet fear that we both tried not to speak about. The kids were silent in the back. I could see Aaron's reflection in the rearview mirror, his small face pale and tired. Grace, normally the more outspoken one, was staring out the window, watching the empty, desolate world pass by. We'd left the city behind, but the weight of it all still felt like it was pressing down on us. There was no clear destination in mind, just north. The further we drove, the more I realized how much we were cutting ourselves off from everything that used to be familiar. The familiar hum of streetlights, the distant sound of cars passing by. It was all gone. In its place, there was only this stillness, punctuated by the occasional rustle of the wind or the faint, distant cries of the infected. I focused on the road, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I couldn't afford to dwell on the fact that the world was coming apart at the seams. My family needed me. We had to keep moving. It was late afternoon when we reached a small town on the outskirts of the highway. The gas stations were empty, and the town looked abandoned, as if it had been left to rot in the space of a few days. There were no people, no cars, just a ghost town stretching out in front of us. "I'll go check for supplies," I said, my voice low. Laura nodded, not looking at me. She was exhausted. I grabbed my pack from the back seat, checking to make sure I had everything. A few more cans, some dried meat, a couple of extra water bottles, anything I could scavenge. I was ready to move quickly. The truck's gas gauge was low, and I didn't want to risk getting stuck here. The town had that strange, hollow feeling to it, like it had been emptied out in a hurry. The wind carried a faint scent of decay, a lingering reminder of what had happened. I stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was cold, but not as cold as it should have been for this time of year. The earth felt wrong. The store I approached was a small, run-down convenience store. The door was cracked open, the old bell above it jangling slightly as I stepped inside. The lights flickered intermittently, casting an eerie glow over the aisles. I moved quietly, the place deserted but not quite safe. The shelves were bare, save for a few items scattered here and there. My eyes scanned the area, heart pounding in my chest. It didn't feel right. The silence was too oppressive. Then I heard it, the soft shuffle of footsteps. I froze. For a moment, I thought it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. But the footsteps came closer, slowly, deliberately. I turned sharply, my hand slipping to the knife in my waistband. My eyes scanned the darkened aisles, and then I saw him. A man, ragged, disheveled, his clothes torn, his face gaunt and hollow. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated, and his mouth hung open as though waiting for something. It was the same look I'd seen in the infected before, but this time, there was something more calculated in his movements. He wasn't just hungry, he was hunting. I didn't have time to think. I reached for the knife, the cold steel of the blade a comfort against the growing panic in my chest. But the man was faster than I expected. He lunged, his hand grasping at the shelves as if trying to steady himself. His eyes locked onto mine, and I could see the desperation in them. But it was more than desperation. It was a hunger that went beyond human, something primal. I sidestepped his first attempt, my knife flashing in the dim light. The blade cut across his arm, a sharp, biting slash that drew a quick gasp of pain from him. He recoiled, but his eyes didn't show fear. They just burned with an insatiable need. I didn't hesitate. The next strike came as he lunged again, his teeth snapping in the air like a wild animal. I twisted his arm, using his momentum to bring him down. But he wasn't out yet. He kicked, his boots connecting with my chest, throwing me backward. I stumbled but recovered quickly, just as he got to his feet. This time, I didn't give him a chance to move. I pressed the knife into his side, twisting the blade deep. The man let out a strangled cry as he collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes remained open, that same hunger still burning in them. But there was nothing left of the man he had once been. But how long before it reached me? I didn't waste time. I grabbed what I could from the store, canned food, some bandages, a few bottles of water, and left. The town was a ghost town for a reason. The infected were already hunting, and I wasn't about to stay there any longer than I had to. When I got back to the truck, Laura was looking at me with a question in her eyes, but she didn't ask. She didn't need to. She could see the tension in my movements, the steel in my eyes. "Let's go," I said, my voice tight. "The next stop is farther north." Laura nodded, and we were back on the road, the truck's engine growling as we drove into the growing darkness ahead. But something gnawed at the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just a matter of getting away. We were in a fight for survival now, and the rules were changing. People were changing. And I was starting to wonder if there was something inside me that was changing. The deeper we drove into the countryside, the quieter the world became. No more shattered windows or burned out cars. Just long, winding stretches of road lined with trees that whispered in the wind. At first, the silence felt like a relief, a break from the madness. But after a few days, it started to feel wrong, like the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something awful to happen. I'd driven for nearly 8 hours straight, the weight of the wheel pressing into my hands. Laura had tried to convince me to rest, but I couldn't. I didn't trust the quiet. I didn't trust the roads. I barely trusted the sun when it came up in the morning, casting light on a world that had lost all sense. We found an abandoned ranger station near a river, a weather-worn building that looked like it hadn't seen people in years. The place was dusty and cluttered with old maps and faded logbooks. There were signs of struggle, overturned chairs, dark stains on the floor, but no bodies. "We'll stay here tonight," I said, sweeping the main room with my flashlight. Laura gave me a look. She'd gotten good at hiding her fear behind a hardened face, but I still saw it, in her eyes, in her posture. She nodded anyway, leading the kids inside while I barricaded the door. Later that night, I sat outside on the small wooden porch with my rifle across my lap. The sky was a deep, starless black. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't care. 1 cream, 1 sugar, just like always. At least some things hadn't changed. Inside, I could hear Laura telling the twins a story to help them sleep. Her voice was calm, steady, like a lighthouse cutting through fog. I envied her strength. I'd try sleeping earlier, but my body wouldn't let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man in the store. The way he moved, the look in his eyes. Not rage, not fear, hunger. Something deeply human, twisted into something monstrous. And the way I'd fought him. I hadn't just reacted. I'd dismantled him. Quick, efficient, brutal. Like my body already knew exactly what to do. The thing was, I didn't feel sick. I wasn't shaking. No fever, no sweats, no cramps. I felt clear, strong, more alive than I had in years, and that scared the hell out of me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rushing water. The river behind the station was moving fast, a silver ribbon slicing through the dense forest. I took Aaron with me to fill our water jugs. He didn't say much. None of us did anymore. But he stuck close, watched everything I did. I caught him mimicking the way I held the jug, the way I crouched near the edge. "You always this quiet?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He looked up at me, solemn. "I don't want to scare Grace." Smart kid, too smart. We filled the jugs and started back when I saw something in the mud. Tracks, human, barefoot. But they weren't old. They were fresh. I scanned the trees. My hand moved to the pistol at my side, instincts flaring to life. Back at the cabin, I didn't tell Laura. Not yet. No reason to panic her unless I had to. I kept the rifle closer, stayed alert, eyes on the windows, ears trained for movement. We stayed another night. A mistake. It was past midnight when I heard it. A scraping sound, software slow, like someone dragging something heavy across wood. I was on my feet instantly, motioning to Laura to get the kids to the bedroom and keep them quiet. She moved without question. I stepped into the hallway, knife in one hand, my Glock in the other. The scraping stopped. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the porch. I pressed my back against the wall beside the door. My pulse pounded in my ears. Another step, then another, then silence. I waited. Nothing. I opened the door. A man stood at the edge of the porch, thin, shaking, his face gaunt, lips cracked, eyes sunken. But he didn't move like the others. He didn't lunge. "Please," he rasped, "help me." My finger hovered over the trigger. He was infected. I could see it in the twitch in his jaw, the blackness around his fingernails. But he wasn't fully gone. Not yet. "I haven't eaten in 3 days," he whispered. "My stomach, it burns. Everything I try, it won't stay down. Please, I don't want to die like them." He stepped closer. That's when I saw the blood under his fingernails. "I'm sorry," I said. He looked up, startled. "For what?" I raised the Glock, pulling the trigger as the man tried to plead. "No, please." Bang. In the morning, we continued driving north, through burned towns and empty farms, past places where the signs had been ripped down or scrawled over with desperate messages. "Safe zone this way. Don't stop. We're still here." Sometimes passing corpses on the road. Aaron and Grace didn't ask questions anymore. Laura sat closer to them than she did to me. I knew she trusted me to protect them. But there was something else now. Something in the way she watched me when I got back from scouting, hands bruised and bloodied, like she was afraid of what I might become. Maybe I was afraid too. It was 3 days later when we found them. A town tucked in the shadow of the old hills, wrapped in pine and fog. It wasn't on any map I recognized, but the lights were on. Actual lights. Laura saw them first and gasped. "Wayne, that's electricity," I muttered. I slowed the truck, the crunch of gravel under the tires echoing into the stillness. We passed a hand-painted sign. "Welcome to Haven's Rest. No violence, no begging, no second chances." That last part sent a chill down my spine. People came out as we pulled up to the town square. Dozens of them. Men and women with hollow eyes and hunting rifles. They didn't point them at us, but they didn't lower them either. A tall woman stepped forward. Broad shoulders, graying hair tied back in a braid. Her jacket bore a faded sheriff's patch. "You from the cities?" she asked, voice rough like gravel. I nodded, just looking to pass through, rest, maybe trade. She eyed the kids, then Laura, then me. "We don't get many families anymore. Most don't make it this far." "What is this place?" I asked. "Haven's Rest," she repeated. "We keep the peace. We survive." I didn't relax, not yet. Places that looked like sanctuary had a bad habit of hiding the worst rot underneath. She led us into a small cabin near the edge of town. It was clean, well kept. There were candles lit, books on the shelves, even blankets that didn't smell like mildew or death. "You can stay the night," she said. "One night, then you move on." "Why?" Laura asked. The woman didn't blink. "Because that's the rule." At dinner, they served a soup made from root vegetables and dried herbs. No meat. "It's hard to get protein now," our host said. A man named Nolan, who wore a priest's collar but didn't mention God once. They asked questions. Where we came from, what we'd seen, what we knew. I gave them the basics. They didn't press, but they watched me carefully, Nolan especially. He smiled too much. His eyes didn't match. Have you been feeling different? He asked me quietly, after the kids had gone to sleep. Since it all began? Laura stiffened beside me. Define different, I said. Stronger, clearer, less broken. He leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Some people are immune, not just to the parasite, to the fear, the hunger. They were meant for this world. I stared at him. You think this was supposed to happen? I think the universe doesn't make mistakes, he said, still smiling. Things simply reset. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat near the window, knife on the table, eyes on the town. I saw them gather near the center square. Maybe 10 people, maybe more, hooded, silent. They dragged a man into the circle. His hands were bound. He was screaming. I almost went out there. Almost. But then I saw what they did to him. The others circled him slowly, not speaking. The tall woman from earlier stood back, watching with cold detachment. Then, as if on cue, the group fell on the man. They didn't kill him quickly. They ate him alive. We were gone before sunrise. No goodbyes, no second chances. As the truck bounced down the dirt road, Aaron asked, "Were those people sick, Daddy?" I kept my eyes on the road. "No," I said. "They were just hungry." But that wasn't the truth. Not really. They weren't like the infected. They'd chosen this. They'd adapted to it, created rules, rituals, a culture. And somehow, that was worse than anything I'd seen so far. The air got colder the farther north we went. By late October, the trees had lost their leaves, leaving skeletal limbs to scrape the sky like fingers clawing at the heavens. Frost slicked the windshield every morning, and the kids had stopped asking when we'd get there. They understood now. There didn't exist anymore. Only a way did. We found an old fire tower deep in the forest, half collapsed, but usable. There was a cabin beneath it, probably once a ranger's post. The door was off its hinges. Moss crept over one corner of the roof, but the fireplace worked and the walls were thick. No lights, no noise, no signs of human life. Just the forest, stretching forever. I taught Aaron how to stack logs properly, taught Grace how to snare rabbits. She cried the first time we got one. Laura didn't say much anymore, but when she looked at me, I could see the weight of it all pressing down on her. She held the kids tighter now when they slept. She never asked for help, but I saw the tremble in her hands at night. I kept the perimeter tight. Every hour I wasn't sleeping, I was checking the tree line, setting traps, sharpening blades. My skin never stopped crawling, the feeling something was watching us. Not an animal, not exactly human, something worse. It was during one of those midnight patrols that I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the edge of the firelight, tall, still, too still. I lifted my rifle, sights trained on its chest. It didn't move. "Back up," I said aloud. My voice was low, calm, no response. I moved forward, boots crunching softly on frost. 15 feet, 10, and then it stepped back into the shadows. Not running, retreating. I tracked it through the trees for half a mile before I lost it. It never made a sound. No snapping branches, no gasping breath. It was as if the forest accepted it, welcomed it. When I returned to the cabin, I didn't tell Laura. I couldn't. The kids were finally sleeping soundly for once, and she needed that peace, even if it was a lie. The next morning, we found a message. Not written, built. Rocks and twigs arranged just outside the cabin, an arrow pointing east. Beneath it, 3 dead squirrels, skinned, neatly. No blood, no knife marks, just placed. "Is it a trap?" Laura asked, her voice hoarse from the cold. I knelt beside the display. Whoever did this wasn't just surviving, they were sending a message, and not to scare us, to warn us. "Something's east of here," I said, standing. "They want us to stay away." Grace clung to her mom's leg, wide-eyed. "Are they the bad people?" "Worse," I said without thinking. "They're the smart ones." By that night, it was snowing. Not much, just flurries. But the sky looked ready to collapse. The trees groaned under the weight of wind and frost. Aaron had a cough that wouldn't quit. I boiled water on the fire and added pine needles, old trick for vitamin C. Laura didn't ask how I knew that. She never did, just handed the mug to our son and kissed his forehead. We were sitting around the fire when we heard it, a long, low howl. Not an animal, a call, then another, farther off, then another, 3 in total, different directions, surrounding us. I grabbed the rifle and moved to the door. Laura stood. "Wayne!" "They're not attacking yet," I said. "They're hunting." "But we're not moving. We're not making noise." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Doesn't matter. They already know where we are." The first attack came just before dawn. Not a swarm, just one. A woman, pale, gaunt. Her face painted with ash and something darker. Eyes ringed in black like a skull. She didn't scream or lunge like the man in the store. She moved slow, deliberate, studying us from just outside the fire's glow. I stepped out with a knife in hand. She didn't flinch, didn't run. She smiled. That's when I saw her hands, bloodied, but not from fighting, from writing. On the bark behind her, smeared in something red, "Feed or freeze." She charged. I moved faster. The fight was violent but controlled. She didn't swing wildly. She aimed, struck with the precision of someone trained, or at least practiced. I slashed her thigh, felt muscle give beneath the blade. She hissed but kept fighting. Then Aaron screamed from inside the cabin. I ended it fast, knife to the heart. She collapsed in my arms like a doll cut from its strings. When I turned around, there were 3 more standing at the tree line, watching. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. Every night after that, we found new signs, messages, remains. Someone had started stacking stones at the edge of our camp, higher and higher each day. One morning, there was a rabbit hanging from a tree. Its eyes had been removed, its skin replaced with dried leaves, sewn crudely together with hair. Grace cried for hours after that. Laura refused to go outside alone. And me, I sharpened the blades, set more traps, watched the tree line and waited, because I knew what was coming. Winter. The snow came in thick sheets, blanketing the forest in silence. It muffled everything, sound, motion, even thought. The world outside our cabin slowed to a frozen crawl, but inside, everything accelerated. Aaron's cough had turned dry and hacking. Grace curled beside her brother each night like she could shield him with her tiny body. Laura barely ate anymore. She moved through the day like a ghost, her eyes always drifting to the windows, watching for shapes in the trees. As for me, I stopped pretending to sleep. I didn't need rest. I needed readiness. They were still out there. I saw them sometimes. Silhouettes shifting between the trunks, not rushing, not hunting, waiting. We'd rationed enough food to make it through a month, maybe 2 if we stretched. But that was before the deep freeze. Game vanished overnight. No birds, no rabbits. The trap stayed empty, the forest too quiet. I couldn't risk hiking far from the camp, always keeping the cabin in eye's reach, trying to forage anything we could eat that wouldn't kill us faster than the cold. It was during one of those treks that I found it, a clearing in the forest, where the snow had been melted into a perfect circle. In the center was a pile of ash, not wood ash, bone ash. Arranged around it were footprints, human, in a ring, each pair standing still as if part of a ceremony, ritual. I didn't stick around long. That night, Grace woke up screaming. I rushed into the bedroom, rifle at the ready, expecting to see someone, something, inside. But she was alone, tears streaking down her cheeks. I saw them, she sobbed. The ones with no mouths. They were whispering. Laura wrapped her arms around her, rocking gently. It was a dream, baby. No, Grace wailed. They were outside first, then they came in. She pointed to the window. I checked it, locked. No footprints outside in the snow. But the ice on the glass had been melted, a faint smudge left behind in the shape of a hand. The next day, when I awoke, I stepped outside the cabin and came to the unsettling realization the truck hood was propped open. The battery and the drive belt were gone. A dead rat lay in the center of the engine. Fucking animals, I muttered to myself. I took my axe and built a new barricade around the cabin's front. Logs, rocks, whatever I could find. I even started stacking snow in thick layers, hoping it would at least slow anyone, or anything, from reaching the door unnoticed. Laura didn't say anything as she watched me. Not until I came back inside, hands red from the cold. You can't keep building walls, Wayne, she said softly. Eventually they'll bury us. I sat down, breathing hard. If they want us, they'll have to dig. That evening, as I stirred a thin soup over the fire, Aaron spoke up. Dad. His voice was quiet. You don't get cold, do you? I looked at him, blinking. What? Your hands. They don't go purple like mine. You walk through the snow in just your coat, and your face doesn't turn red. Laura turned to look at me. I hadn't noticed before, but he was right. I hadn't felt the frostbite. Not once. Aaron frowned. Are you changing too? No, I said, too quickly, too harshly. He shrank back. I reached for him. Hey, Number, listen to me. My voice softened. I'm still your dad. I'll always be your dad. I'm just tougher than most. But even as I said it, I wondered. 2 days later, they came again. Not to attack, to warn. Another arrangement, just outside the tree line. This time it was bones. Animal, I hoped. Stacked into a symbol I didn't recognize. Beneath it, carved into the snow with a charred stick, you burn too bright. I burned the bones, the symbol, the whole damn message. I buried the fire beneath snow. That night, Laura sat beside me while the kids slept. We can't stay, she whispered. We won't survive moving, I replied. We won't survive staying either. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was thinner now, lined with worry. But her eyes, they still had that fire. The same one I saw when we first met. The same one that told me she wasn't going to break, not while the kids were still breathing. Then we go at first thaw, I said. We move northeast, toward the old mining roads. She nodded. What if they follow? I checked the fire, stoked it higher. Then we burn the forest behind us. In the distance, as the wind howled over the trees, I heard something new. Not a scream, not a howl. A drum, slow, rhythmic, getting closer. The drumming didn't stop. It echoed through the woods like a heartbeat, slow, inhumanly steady. For 3 nights it circled us, drifting from one direction to the next, always just out of reach. The sound was primal, wood against bone. On the 4th night, it went silent. And that was worse. The silence left a pressure in my skull, the kind you feel just before a storm breaks. I didn't sleep, didn't sit. I stood at the cabin window and watched the trees, my rifle cradled in one arm, a blade in the other. I'd sharpened it to the point it shaved the hairs from my forearm. Aaron's cough had subsided, but he was weak, quiet. He'd stopped asking when we were leaving. Grace clung to her mother constantly, eyes always fixed on the door. She didn't cry anymore. Children adapt, even to nightmares. We had to move soon. The snow was starting to soften in the daylight, revealing patches of brown earth. The wind had lost its bite, a break in the weather. But I could feel them tightening the noose. Each morning I found new signs, tools missing, boot prints around the traps, trees marked with strange, looping symbols that seemed to drip sap like open wounds. Laura tried to keep busy, mending clothes and sorting supplies, but I could tell she was fraying at the edges. When she thought I wasn't looking, she stared at the tree line too. She heard it, the sound of breath just beyond the trees. We all did. Then came the graves. I found them during patrol. 6 mounds in the snow, carefully shaped and topped with small, childlike totems, twisted branches, bits of cloth, small hand-carved dolls. One of them wore a scarf made from rabbit fur, the same kind Laura had sewn for Grace. That broke something in me. Not rage, not fear, a cold certainty. This wasn't chaos anymore. It was theater. They wanted us to know. They were watching. They were preparing. And they didn't fear us. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I prayed. Not to any god I remembered, just to the dark, to the part of me that had survived every wound, every cut, every time I should have died but didn't. I asked it for strength. Then I buried the prayer under fire. We made our plan by candlelight. I marked out a path on the old forestry map, north by northeast. If we moved at first light and kept off the main trails, we could reach the old service road in 2 days. After that, we'd follow the frozen river north. They'd follow us, I knew that. At dawn, we packed everything we could carry. The rest we burned. If we were going to be hunted, I wouldn't leave them a scrap. Aaron was quiet as I lifted him into the sled I'd built from a broken door and salvaged rope. Grace sat beside him, holding his hand. Laura had the rifle, her jaw set like stone. I took one last look at the cabin. Then I lit the fuse. The old gas can caught instantly, roaring up through the firewood and into the roof. Smoke twisted into the sky like a signal. Let them come. By the time we could no longer see the cabin, there was an audible boom as the truck exploded. We didn't make it far before we saw the first one. A man, or something like one. crouched in the snow. He wore no coat. His skin was blue-grey, stretched too tight across his frame. He didn't flinch as we approached. He just smiled. His teeth were filed to points. I stepped forward. He didn't run, didn't speak. Laura raised the rifle slowly, shaking, in the man's direction. I put my hand on top of the rifle, lowering it without a word. Ammo was scarce, and this man was unarmed. Removing my knife from its sheath as I approached the man, the twisted smile never dropping from his face, I looked at him, almost feeling pity for just a moment, before burying the blade in the back of his neck. He slumped over, a faint smile still etched on his face as his pupils dilated. Laura didn't even blink. We made camp by a frozen creek that night, surrounded by fallen pines. No fire, too risky. The kids slept huddled under blankets. Laura leaned against me, shivering despite the layers. "I keep thinking about the graves," she whispered. "Why children?" I stared into the dark. "Because they want us scared." "Is it working?" I didn't answer. She already knew. Just before dawn, I heard them. Footsteps, maybe half a dozen, not charging, creeping. I rose slowly, blade in hand. Laura sat up. "Wayne." "Shh." The shapes emerged from the trees, silhouettes against the early grey. 3, 4, 7, too many. The kids were awake now. I could hear their breathing. "Stay down," I whispered. "Don't move." They stopped. One of them knelt and placed something in the snow. $1, wooden, carved. It almost looked like me. I drew my Glock, firing a single shot as my sights fell center mass on one of the shadows. Then they retreated, vanishing like smoke. We were out of time. 2 bullets remaining. Tomorrow they'd come for real, and I'd be ready. We spent most of that day constructing a small shelter next to the creek from logs and branches, preparing for the coming night. I handed Laura my Glock. "There's 2 shots left, if any of them anywhere near you or the twins." "I will, hun," she said softly. The stillness of the night was the first sign something was wrong. There was no wind, no rustle of leaves. The world had gone quiet, unnervingly so. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the same feeling that had been growing all day, that slow, gnawing tension in the air. The infected were closing in, and they weren't going to stop. Laura was in the small shelter beside the creek we'd constructed that day, with Grace and Aaron, trying to keep them calm. She was worried. I could see it in her eyes, though she didn't show it when she looked at the kids. She was holding us together, like she always did. But I knew there wasn't much time left. I stepped into the tree line, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. My boots crunching against the dirt was the only sound in the air. The forest was eerily silent. It was a good thing. When they came, they wouldn't know I was here yet. Feeling the weight of the rifle against my back. Tonight, I was going to make sure the infected didn't get anywhere near my family. I crouched behind a large pine, listening. There was no sign of movement, no telltale crack of branches or snap of twigs. But then I saw them. 6 figures, stumbling through the trees, their shadows barely visible in the moonlight. They were slow at first, as though they weren't quite sure where they were going. But they kept moving, closer to the creek. Their eyes were wild, the hunger unmistakable, even from this distance. I had no time to waste. They were still too far for me to make a move, but I knew they'd close the distance quickly. I moved silently, positioning myself between them and the creek. I wasn't going to let them get any closer. I steadied my rifle down on a fallen tree and took my first shot, blowing the first of the infected's brain matter and skull fragments raining onto the snow. 6. They reacted quickly, sprinting in my direction, driven by hunger. I racked my rifle, taking a shot at the second target, landing with an audible crunch into the upper left side of the gaunt man's hip, followed by anguished screams. 5. They'd now closed the distance. The closest of them lunged, a large man who had seemingly once been strong, but now looked like little more than a shell. His face was gaunt, hollowed out by hunger that had taken control of him. I sidestepped, avoiding his grab and drawing my knife in a single fluid motion. It was second nature, the fight instinct kicking in. The blade found its mark, straight into his throat in one smooth motion. He let out a low gurgle and dropped to the ground, grasping at my jacket, blood pooling beneath him. But there wasn't time to process the kill. I heard the fourth one before I saw him. A young man, maybe in his 20s, moving too fast for my liking. He wasn't as slow as the others, and I could tell he was more dangerous. I didn't give him a chance to act. The moment he lunged, I stepped into him, my knee driving into the top of his abdomen to knock the wind out of him. He stumbled downward into me, and I didn't waste time. Grabbing onto his collar, I slammed him onto his side. My knife flashed again, this time into his heart. He spluttered in pain with a final gasp and collapsed. 4. Another one, a woman, came at me from the side before I could get back to my feet. A shrill scream leaving her lips as she buried her knife in my lower back and her teeth in my neck. Hearing another set of footsteps rapidly crunching through the snow approaching from my right side. I grasped a thick log from the ground and through the burning pain radiating through my back, swung it at 90 degrees as the blade exited and re-entered my back with a growl. It landed true, collapsing the skull of the approaching fifth infected with a squelching thud, sending him to the floor in convulsions. 3. That's when I heard the gunshot, first one and then a second. Laura, I thought in a panic. I reached back, pulling the biting woman away with all my strength, her teeth pulling my flesh away with them, and delivered a right cross with a malicious, hateful intent. Crushing her nose into a faucet of blood, she collapsed with a grotesque, bloody smile onto the snow-covered ground, with her back propped by a large rock. I approached the woman, ending it with a heavy stomp to her skull on the rock. 2. There was no moment to recuperate, cringing from the pain from breathing. I threw my rifle on my back and ran back towards the creek, to Laura and the kids. I'd fought before, many times, but there was something different about this. These weren't monsters, they were people. And this wasn't leaving some asshole at a bar in a bloody heap. They were executions. Kill or be killed, or worse. I wasn't sure how long I ran, blood soaking every inch of my back and legs, before I saw Laura just outside the tree line approaching the creek. "Laura," I gasped. She was at the edge of the clearing, her eyes scanning the bodies on the ground, my Glock in her hand. "Wayne." Her voice cracked. She knew what had happened. She knew I had to do what I had done. I wiped the blood from my brow. "Where are they?" I said. "2 more." She didn't say anything for a long moment, just staring at me, her face pale but resolute. "They came running out of the woods. I shot them," she said, blinking in disbelief of herself. "We need to go," I added, my voice quiet but firm. She nodded, and I could see her lips trembling, but she didn't hesitate. "Let's go." I turned back to the shelter, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me. My body was spent, but we couldn't stop here for long. Laura bandaged my wounds as best as she could, but the blood wouldn't let up. We had to move, and we had to do it now. The forest swallowed the world behind us. For the last few miles, we moved like shadows, silent, deliberate, one step at a time. My left arm was clutched tightly against my ribs. Every breath felt like a blade. I didn't have to check to know the wounds were deep. Blood had soaked through my shirt hours ago, but I kept moving. I had to. The kids were exhausted, dragging their feet, and Laura had taken Grace's hand while half carrying Aaron over the rough trail. And so we walked. Now, just as the last light of day filtered through the canopy, I spotted it, a shape ahead. Dark, square, man-made, a cabin. I blinked hard, swayed heavily on my feet. Laura caught up beside me and saw it too. She didn't speak, just squeezed my hand and picked up the pace. It was old, but intact, set slightly into the slope of the hill, with moss-covered shingles and a rusted chimney that looked long cold. The porch sagged but held, a place no one had lived in for a long time, or so it seemed. I staggered up the steps and tested the door. It wasn't locked. The air inside was dry and stale. Dust hung in sunbeams like drifting ash. The cabin smelled of aged pine and something metallic, but it was quiet, safe. Laura ushered the kids in and sat them near the fireplace. She dropped her pack and started checking over their scrapes and blisters, whispering softly to keep them calm. I moved room to room, clearing it like muscle memory, old instincts, no signs of recent use. In the kitchen, shelves full of supplies, canned goods, rice, beans, dehydrated food, sealed in vacuum-packed bags. Then I found the trapdoor. It was in the pantry, cleverly hidden under a false floor. I pulled it open and was hit with a wave of musty air. Below, a narrow ladder disappeared into darkness. "Stay here," I called to Laura. I descended slowly, knife in hand, every joint in my body protesting. The bunker was small, but well fortified. Thick walls, air filtration unit in one corner, backup batteries stacked on wooden pallets, shelves upon shelves of provisions, medical kits, even weapons, all untouched. And on a cot in the corner lay a man, or what was left of him, thin, hollow, not a mark of violence, just stillness. Next to his body was a bottle of whiskey, an old dry-as-bones pack of cigarettes, and a journal splayed open. I grabbed the bottle and looked over it. It was in an unlabeled, oddly shaped bottle with a set of angel wings, though it did smell familiar. Fuck it, I earned it, I thought to myself. Slonche. I tilted the bottle towards the corpse, taking a swig of the man's whiskey. I picked up the journal, my hand shaking from blood loss and fatigue. I prepped for everything: nuclear war, civil collapse, disease, but not this. Everything I eat turns to poison. I haven't eaten in weeks. Water's the only thing I can keep down. The parasite, it's inside me, and I'm not one of the ones who can eat. I can't eat people. I won't. The rest of the writing was fragmented, scrawled and smeared, unreadable. I sat down heavily on the nearest bench, the journal slipping from my fingers. My vision swam. I could hear footsteps above me, Laura calling my name. I managed to climb back up the ladder and close the trapdoor before she reached the kitchen. She helped me to a chair, eyes wide with worry as she looked at the blood soaking through my shirt. "It's okay," I said. "We're safe now." "Wayne, you're not okay," she whispered, crouching beside me. "You need rest. I'm not going to make it, I cut in gently. But you and the kids, you'll have everything you need. A bunker full of supplies. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She was strong, stronger than she gave herself credit for. I reached for her hand, gripping it with what strength I had left. Tell them I was proud of them. Tell them I love them. You'll tell them yourself, she said fiercely, but we both knew better. I leaned back, staring out the cracked window as the last gold light of dusk painted the treetops, lighting one of the bone-dry cigarettes. Grace and Aaron were laughing quietly, their voices muffled through the walls. For the first time in weeks, they felt safe enough to laugh. That was enough. I'll sit here for a while, I said softly, with a pained chuckle, just to keep watch a little longer. Laura kissed my temple and pressed her forehead to mine. As night wrapped around the cabin, I closed my eyes, the sound of wind and trees gently replacing the chaos I'd carried for so long. Soon followed by an all-encompassing silence